The boy was curled up between two trash bins, shaking from cold and hunger, his face streaked with grime and tears. Gerald Whitaker, the silver-haired millionaire who never stopped for anyone, stopped this time and in that instant. Everything he thought he knew about life unraveled. Gerald was the kind of man who walked through New York like he owned it because, in some ways, he did. Real estate, tech, media, you name it. He had his fingers in it. At 72, his suits were sharper than ever, his shoes Italian, his routine precise. But underneath the surface, there was a quiet desperation, the kind that no money could bury. His penthouse was silent, his days filled with meetings and no meaning, and the echo of a long-lost voice haunted him when he tried to sleep. That night, it had started with a simple mistake. His driver had taken a detour to avoid traffic on 5th. A rare thing. Gerald normally insisted on keeping the route clean, controlled. But the city was pulsing with tourists and protesters in some kind of half-marathon. The black Bentley crawled down a dim backstreet in the Bowery, a place where wealth usually never strayed. Gerald was scrolling through emails on his phone, distracted, detached. Then something caught his eye. It was a movement, just a flicker. He looked up, and he saw him. A child, alone, shivering in the cold night, knees pulled up to his chest, wearing nothing but a torn hoodie and dirty jeans. Maybe 8, maybe 10, maybe younger. Gerald couldn't tell through the filth. The driver didn't notice. Why would he? Stop the car, Gerald said sharply. Sir. The driver looked at him through the mirror. Stop. The damn car. The brakes squealed. Gerald stepped out without waiting. The city stank out here of rot, of piss, of decay, and he felt the contrast like a slap. The cold bit through his tailored coat. His polished shoes splashed into a puddle of old rainwater as he crossed the narrow alleyway. The boy didn't look up. He just kept sobbing into his arms, so thin they looked like twigs. Gerald crouched down slowly, knees cracking as he moved. It was the first time in years he'd bent this low for anyone. Hey, he said gently. Are you okay? The boy flinched. Gerald didn't touch him. He remembered what fear looked like. He'd once seen it in his own child's eyes before everything went to hell. What's your name? He asked. Nothing. Are you hungry? The boy finally lifted his head, and Gerald's heart stopped. It was the eyes. Those gray-blue eyes. Familiar. Impossible. The boy's cheeks were hollow, face too gaunt to place. But those eyes, God, they hit Gerald like a freight train. He swayed. You look like, he whispered. No, it can't be. The boy was staring at him too now, through blurry, bloodshot eyes. You're him, the child whispered, voice barely a rasp. I saw your picture in Mom's book. You're Gerald Whitaker. Gerald went cold. Who's your mother? He asked slowly, voice tight. The boy's lip trembled. Jenna. And the world spun. Jenna. His granddaughter. The girl his son had disowned. The girl who'd vanished from his life a decade ago after a screaming match that ended with slammed doors and threats no one took back. Gerald stood up too fast and had to steady himself. Get in the car, he said, his voice clipped now. We're getting you out of here. The boy didn't move. Gerald reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a protein bar from his driver's snack stash, unwrapped it, held it out. The boy snatched it like an animal, devoured it. Gerald signaled the driver, who hurried over, confused. We're taking him with us, Gerald snapped. To where, sir? Home. The penthouse was warm. Golden lights, marble floors, a fireplace flickering behind glass. And yet it had never felt more foreign to Gerald than when the boy stepped inside. The child stood near the door, like a stray dog unsure if it would be allowed to stay. What's your name? Gerald asked again, kneeling beside him. The boy looked up, chewing the last bite of his second sandwich. His hair was matted, his skin pale under the grime. Eli. Gerald swallowed. Eli what? Eli Harper. Harper. Jenna's married name. She'd kept it, then, or given it to her son. Gerald blinked away the sting in his eyes. Where's your mother now? Eli's face fell. She told me to wait outside the shelter. Said she'd be right back. But it's been 2 days. 2 days. Gerald felt the room tilt. Why didn't you go to the police? They always send us back, Eli whispered. They don't believe us. Or they say they'll take me away. And your father? He left before I was born. Mom never talks about him. Gerald let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He rose, walked to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a scotch with a trembling hand. He hadn't known, had no idea Jenna had a child, that she was in New York, that she was homeless. How had the world become so cruel? And how had he let it happen? The next morning, Gerald hired a private investigator. By afternoon, the man returned with grim news. Jenna Harper had been living in and out of shelters. She'd worked at diners, grocery stores, a laundromat. But 3 months ago, she'd been laid off. No recent record since. No hospital admittance. No arrest. No confirmed death. She was just gone. Gerald stared at the report, heart twisting. And then he looked at Eli, curled up on the couch, finally sleeping, a clean blanket pulled to his chin. How many nights had that boy been alone? The days passed. Gerald adjusted his schedule, skipped meetings, took calls from home. For the first time in his adult life, he cooked breakfast, burned pancakes, laughed when Eli made a face, found himself smiling more than he had in 20 years. He bought books, games, a puppy, at Eli's wide-eyed request. They named it Lucky. But something haunted Gerald, a question he hadn't asked. Eli, he said one night, over chicken soup, why did your mom have a picture of me? Eli hesitated. She kept this box. Old photos. Letters. She said you were her grandfather. That you used to be rich and powerful, but you didn't want anything to do with her after her dad died. Gerald's jaw tightened. That's not true, he said quietly. I didn't know where she was. She left. She said you kicked her out. Silence. He closed his eyes. I said things I regret, Gerald admitted. But I never stopped wondering about her. If I'd known about you. Eli stared at him, unsure whether to believe. Gerald leaned forward. You are my family, he said, and I'm going to make this right. But just as things began to heal, the past came crashing in. The phone rang one rainy afternoon. It was the investigator. We found her, he said grimly. But it's not good. Jenna was in a hospital in Queens. Collapsed in a subway station. Malnourished. Delirious. Fever of 104. No ID. Admitted as a Jane Doe. Gerald dropped everything. He told Eli the truth gently, with all the care he could muster. The boy's face crumbled. Is she gonna die? I won't let that happen, Gerald said, fierce now. He hadn't been there when his son died in that motorcycle accident. Hadn't been there when Jenna ran away, pregnant and scared. But he was here now. And nothing would stop him from bringing her home. The hospital was small, underfunded, and overworked. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic and sorrow. Gerald Whitaker wasn't used to waiting. Not in boardrooms. Not in restaurants. Certainly not in grimy ERs surrounded by coughing strangers and crying children. But here he waited. Silently. Anxiously. Like every second stolen from the hourglass was a crime against time itself. Eli sat beside him, clutching a stuffed bear Gerald had bought from the gift shop downstairs. It was cheap, with one eye sewn crooked, but Eli held it like it was treasure. The boy hadn't spoken in over 30 minutes. A nurse finally stepped into the waiting room and called, "Family of Jenna Harper?" Gerald stood up. "That's us," he said. The nurse glanced at Eli, then at Gerald's expensive suit, and blinked. "You're her grandfather. This is her son." The nurse's face softened. "Come with me." They walked down a hallway that smelled like bleach and forgotten dreams. Machines beeped from behind curtains. A janitor wheeled a cart past them without looking up. "She's stable now," the nurse explained. "We got her fever down. She was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and there are signs of physical exhaustion probably from sleeping rough. Can we see her?" "She's awake. But she's weak. She might not be fully coherent yet. They reached room 214. The nurse opened the door gently. Gerald stepped in first, and the sight broke him. Jenna was curled up in a hospital bed, her cheeks sunken, her eyes dark hollows. Tubes ran into her arm. Her lips were dry, her hair matted. She looked 20 years older than her 31 years. But it was her, his granddaughter, the girl he'd once cradled as a newborn, the toddler who used to run barefoot through his gardens, chasing butterflies and yelling stories. The teenager who screamed, "You never loved my dad," through hot tears before slamming the door and vanishing into the night. Her eyes fluttered open. For a second, there was no recognition. Then, "Grandpa," she croaked. Gerald's chest caved. "Yes, sweetheart. It's me. I'm here." She began to cry. Eli ran forward, the bear still in his arms. "Mom." Jenna let out a gasp as he threw his arms around her. "Eli," she whispered. "Oh my God, you're okay." He nodded fiercely. "I waited like you told me. And then he found me. He took care of me. He brought me to you." Jenna's eyes moved to Gerald. And for a moment, all the years, the pain, the fights, the silence hung between them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Gerald shook his head. No, Jenna. I'm the one who should have looked for you. I let my pride destroy our family. I can't undo what's happened, but I can be here now, if you'll let me." She said nothing, just reached for his hand. He held it, fiercely, like a promise. Jenna stayed in the hospital for 10 days. Gerald hired a private nurse, pulled strings, upgraded her to a private room with sunlight and silence. He visited every day. So did Eli. The boy read to her from a battered fantasy novel, his voice cracking in all the right places. They laughed sometimes, and sometimes Jenna cried. She told them pieces of the years she'd lost, the addiction she fought to escape, the dead-end jobs, the shelters, the moment she gave birth to Eli in a clinic with flickering lights and no air conditioning, the man who left her, the day she stole diapers, the night she slept under a bridge with rats brushing her leg. And Gerald sat through it all, ashamed, awed, changed. One evening, after Eli had gone home with the nanny Gerald hired, Jenna looked at her grandfather and said, "Why now?" "What do you mean? Why save us now? After all this time?" He paused. "I thought I had time," he said quietly, "to fix things, to reach out. But time isn't a contract. It's not negotiable. When I saw Eli in that alley, something snapped. I saw my son in his eyes, and I realized that everything I built, every skyscraper, every company meant nothing if I didn't have my family." She stared at him, then nodded. "Okay, just that." But it was enough. When Jenna was discharged, Gerald brought her and Eli back to his penthouse. At first, she resisted, said she'd find work, said she didn't want to be a burden. "You're not," he told her. "You're a second chance." So she stayed. And life, slowly, became something new. Not perfect, but real. Gerald found himself cooking more, listening more, laughing, genuinely laughing for the first time in years. He started forgetting meetings, canceling trips. His assistant panicked. His investors speculated. He didn't care. He was watching his great-grandson learn to ride a bike in Central Park. He was watching Jenna read again, write again, smile again. And for once, that was enough. But peace never lasts forever. It came on a Tuesday. Gerald was in his study when the knock came. Not a knock, exactly. A buzz from the front desk. "There's a man here to see you," the concierge said. "Says it's about Miss Harper." Gerald frowned. "Send him up." The elevator dinged 10 minutes later. The man who stepped out was tall, lean, with an expensive leather jacket and sunglasses he didn't remove. "Mr. Whitaker," he said smoothly. "My name's Cade. I'm Jenna's ex, Eli's father." Gerald's blood ran cold. He hadn't known this man even existed. "What do you want?" Cade smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I heard Jenna's back in the city, and I heard she's living with you. Thought I'd come reconnect." "With your son?" "With what's mine." Gerald stood. "You were never in his life. You don't get to show up now and make demands. Oh, but I do, Cade said, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. DNA test. I got curious a few years back. Found out. He's mine. And legally, that gives me options. Gerald didn't even look at the paper. You're not taking him. Is that a threat, old man? No, Gerald said quietly. It's a promise. Cade laughed. I'm guessing you don't want this getting messy. Press, court drama. Bad for your reputation. So here's what I want: $500,000. In cash. And I walk away. Gerald stared at him. Then he laughed. You think you can blackmail me? Not blackmail, Cade said, still smiling. Let's call it a family settlement. Gerald stepped forward, his face inches from Cade's. You're not getting a cent. And if you come near Jenna or Eli again, I will destroy you. Not just financially. I will end your name, your job, your credit, your freedom. You won't be able to rent a damn scooter in this city. The smile vanished. You'll regret this. No, Gerald said. You will. He opened the door. Cade stormed out, and Gerald locked it behind him. But threats linger, and the past doesn't go quietly. That night, Jenna found Gerald pacing the hallway, fists clenched. What happened? She asked. He told her. She went pale. Oh God, he found us. He won't hurt you. I'll make sure of it. But her hands trembled. He's dangerous, Grandpa. You don't know him like I do. Gerald looked her in the eyes. Then tell me everything. No more secrets. She nodded, and the floodgates opened. Cade had been cruel, controlling, violent in whispers and in threats. Never reported, never proven, but always there. The reason she ran. The reason she never stayed in one place too long. Because he was always one step behind. I thought he'd forgotten us, she whispered. He didn't, Gerald said grimly. But I'll handle him. How? Any way I have to. And he meant it. Because Gerald Whitaker had spent his life building empires. But now he was ready to burn them down to protect what truly mattered. The next morning, Gerald didn't call his assistant. He didn't check the markets. He didn't read the Wall Street Journal over black coffee like he had for the past 40 years. Instead, he opened a locked drawer in his study. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, thick with names, numbers, debts owed, and favors long promised. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to a private security firm he had once used to protect a Saudi prince. The second was to a man named Weller, an old acquaintance with a shady past and a clean record. By sundown, he had what he needed. Cade Voss, Weller said over a secure line. Real name Cody Vossler. Juvenile record sealed. Adult record nearly spotless except for 2 dropped charges and a restraining order in Nevada that never stuck. Bounced around between states. Debt in 4 cities. Currently unemployed, living above a pool hall in Queens. Good, Gerald said. I want him watched. Discreetly. You expecting him to run? No. I'm expecting him to be stupid. The next 3 days passed like a storm cloud no one could shake. Jenna barely slept. She kept glancing over her shoulder, even inside the penthouse. Eli, sensing the tension, grew quiet again, drifting back into silence like a tide retreating from the sand. Gerald didn't leave the apartment. He was preparing. One night, after Eli had gone to bed, he sat across from Jenna with a thick manila envelope. I want to talk to you about guardianship, he said. Her brows furrowed. What do you mean? In case anything happens. To you. To me. If Cade tries something, I want you to name me as legal guardian for Eli. Not just temporary custody. Full rights. Jenna stared at the paper. That's a big step. I know. She hesitated. You think Cade will go that far? Gerald didn't answer. Because he already knew. He had seen men like Cade before. Men who didn't want people just leverage. And now Cade had found the biggest bank vault in the city hiding behind a child's name. After a long silence, Jenna took the pen and signed. 2 days later, it happened. Gerald came home to find the apartment door ajar. His blood turned to ice. He stepped inside slowly, quietly. Jenna, he called. Eli. No answer. He rushed down the hallway. Eli's bedroom was empty. So was Jenna's. Then he saw the broken vase. And a note, scrawled in jagged, angry letters. You should have paid. Gerald stared at the paper. Then he turned and made the call. By midnight, the apartment was swarming with police and private security. Gerald stood in the center of it all, giving orders like a general in war. I want every traffic camera pulled, every bridge and tunnel flagged. He's not getting out of this city. Detective Ruiz, a tired-looking woman with keen eyes, crossed her arms. We've issued an Amber Alert for Eli and a missing person bulletin for Jenna. But if Voss is smart, he's already off the grid. He's not smart, Gerald growled. He's reckless. Ruiz raised a brow. You sure about that? He came into my home and left without a trace. That sounds calculated. Gerald clenched his jaw. Then we outcalculate him. He turned to his head of security. Activate Tier 2 protocol. Use the drone surveillance. Face match every station. Every port. Yes, sir. As they dispersed, Gerald stood alone by the window. New York glittered beneath him. Indifferent. Immense. He whispered under his breath. I'm coming for you, Jenna. I swear it. Hours passed. At 3:27 a.m., Weller called. We found something. An ATM camera caught Voss withdrawing cash in Brooklyn. Timestamp matches about an hour after your people were taken. He had a woman and a kid with him. They looked scared. Where? Bushwick. We're tracking. By 5 a.m., they had narrowed the search to a 3-block radius. An old warehouse district mostly abandoned after the recession. Gerald rode in the back of a black SUV, hands clenched in his lap, heart pounding. He wasn't a man prone to panic. But this was different. This was blood. When the SUV rolled to a stop, the morning sun was just beginning to rise. Pink light smeared across the sky like a wound. Gerald stepped out. The warehouse looked dead. But inside, he could feel it. Something was breathing. The plan was simple. Surround. Enter. Secure. His team moved with military precision. They breached the back entrance silently. Inside, the place reeked of oil and mildew. Shadows curled around rusted pillars. Rats scattered. Thina cried. Soft. Frightened. Mom. Gerald froze. Then he ran. The team shouted behind him, but he didn't care. He followed the sound through a maze of hallways, past broken machinery and piles of junk. And there finally he found them. Jenna was tied to a chair, blood on her lip. Eli was huddled in a corner, arms wrapped around his knees. Cade stood over them, holding a pipe. And when he saw Gerald, he smiled. Too late, old man. But Gerald didn't stop. He charged. And for the first time in decades, he didn't think about consequences, or image, or legacy. He thought about his family. And he hit Cade with the full force of everything he had left. The pipe clattered to the ground. Cade stumbled back. Security swarmed in. It was over in less than 10 seconds. But it would live in Gerald's memory forever. Later, at the hospital, Jenna lay with an 4 in her arm. Eli sat beside her, holding her hand. Gerald watched them from the doorway, tears in his eyes. Ruiz came to stand beside him. He's in custody, she said. No bail. Gerald nodded. You did good, Mr. Whitaker. You brought them home. He shook his head. They were always my home. I just forgot how to find them. She smiled faintly. You remembered when it counted. In the weeks that followed, the story hit the press. Billionaire rescues estranged granddaughter and great-grandson in dramatic warehouse standoff. But Gerald didn't grant interviews. He didn't do press. Instead, he stayed home. With Jenna. With Eli. He helped Jenna enroll in college again online this time, for writing. He taught Eli chess. They took weekend trips to upstate farms and went pumpkin picking in October. Gerald laughed when Eli got mud all over his designer jeans. Life didn't go back to what it was. It became something better. Something real. On Christmas morning, Gerald sat by the fire, a blanket on his knees. Eli was tearing through wrapping paper, shouting with delight. Jenna poured hot cocoa into 3 mugs and sat beside her grandfather. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For choosing us." Gerald looked at her, then at Eli, then out the window where snow was beginning to fall. "I didn't choose you," he said. "You were always mine. I just had to remember what mattered." Jenna leaned her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in decades, Gerald Whitaker felt full. Not of wealth, but of purpose. Spring arrived slowly in New York. The gray skies began to peel open, soft sunlight finding its way between glass towers and warming even the most forgotten corners of the city. For Gerald Whitaker, it felt like the first spring he'd ever truly seen. He was no longer the man with a schedule inked down to the minute. The empire still existed as companies, his staff, his investments, but they ran without him now. He didn't need them the way he once did. For the first time in over 50 years, he had no interest in ruling the world. Because his world had changed. It now lived in a small apartment 2 floors below his own, the one Jenna had insisted on moving into so she could feel like a grown-up again. He let her. With her headstrong pride and stubborn fire, she reminded him painfully of his son. Gerald watched them, Jenna and Eli, flourish like seeds finally placed in the sun. Eli was thriving at his new school. He had friends now. He brought home paintings that hung crooked on Gerald's fridge. He played piano badly but passionately. Every note a declaration of life. Every smile a mirror of the boy Gerald had once failed to raise. Jenna, too, was becoming herself again. She wrote daily. Poems. Short stories. Raw, beautiful things that sometimes made Gerald cry when he read them late at night. She even submitted some to journals and one got published. Gerald had 6 copies of it printed, framed, and hung across his offices. Jenna rolled her eyes, but secretly she beamed. Then came the day Jenna knocked on Gerald's door with trembling hands. "Can we talk?" He invited her in, worried. She held out a letter. "From Columbia University. They accepted me," she whispered. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, softly, "That's incredible. But," she looked down, "I'd be starting full-time in the fall. It means I wouldn't be around as much. And Eli, we'll be fine," Gerald finished gently. "You need to do this." She blinked back tears. "Would you help?" "With Eli?" He smiled. "There's nothing I'd rather do." That fall, Jenna started school. Gerald became something he had never imagined. A daily school run, lunch packing, math homework, helping great-grandfather. It humbled him. It healed him. He woke up earlier, slower, softer. His staff adjusted to his new schedule, meetings pushed, calls taken from the park bench while Eli played soccer. He even stopped wearing suits. Once, twice, eventually, always. But change is never perfect. And peace is always threatened. It began with small things. An envelope slipped under the door of Jenna's apartment. No return address. Inside, a single newspaper clipping. Voss sentenced to 12 years without parole. But across it, in red ink, a single word was scrawled: appeal. Gerald turned cold. He tightened security, moved Jenna and Eli into his apartment again. "Just for a few weeks," he said. "Just until they were sure." More strange things followed. A man spotted watching Eli's school. An anonymous voicemail whispering, "You'll regret what you did." Police were called. Reports filed. But nothing stuck. Jenna began sleeping with her lights on again. Gerald didn't sleep at all. Then, one night, Gerald had a sharp pain in his chest. He didn't tell anyone at first. He brushed it off. A flare of stress, he told himself. But the next morning, it came again. Stronger. The hospital confirmed it. A minor heart attack. He stayed overnight for observation. Jenna never left his side. When he woke, she was there, holding his hand like he once had held hers in a dim hospital room not so long ago. "I'm not ready to lose you," she whispered. "You won't," he lied, gently. He knew he was aging. Knew his time wasn't infinite. And that made his next decision simple. Weeks later, a press conference was called. Gerald Whitaker stepped onto the stage, not in a suit, but in a sweater and jeans. The press gasped. He spoke clearly, powerfully. I am stepping down as chairman of Whitaker Global Holdings. Effective immediately. Cameras flashed. My successor will not be a board member. Not a billionaire. Not someone molded in the image of greed. It will be my granddaughter Jenna Harper. The room erupted. Reporters shouted. He raised a hand. She is the future I failed to see. The voice I failed to hear. But no longer. She knows the world we live in. She's lived in its shadows. She's fought its cruelty. And she's still standing. That's the kind of leadership we need. He stepped away from the podium and into a life without power but full of purpose. In the following months, Jenna began her transition into the company slowly, carefully, refusing any special treatment. She insisted on working through every department, learning, listening. Gerald beamed with pride from a quiet corner. The press softened. The shareholders bristled then calmed. Because under Jenna's leadership, something new began to bloom. An investment wing dedicated solely to affordable housing. Scholarships for single mothers. A mental health foundation named Eli's House, offering therapy to homeless children. And quietly, behind the scenes, Gerald wrote checks. Not for buildings. Not for profit. For people. On a rainy March evening, Gerald sat in the park with Eli, watching the boy feed pigeons. Grandpa, Eli said suddenly, do you believe people can change? Gerald looked at him. I didn't. For a long time. I thought we were who we were. And now, I believe in second chances. Eli grinned. Good. Because I got an F on my spelling test. But I think I can do better next time. Gerald laughed. Loud, full, real. That's the spirit, kid. They walked home slowly, hand in hand, past streetlights flickering to life. The last chapter came quietly, as most endings do. One morning, Gerald didn't wake up. No struggle, no fear, just peace. A half-read book on his chest. Eli's drawing beside it. A smile still on his face. The funeral was held on a crisp April morning. No lavish ceremony. No marble mausoleum. Just a quiet service in Central Park, under the tree where Gerald had once watched Eli ride a bike for the first time. Jenna spoke. He built skyscrapers. But in the end, he chose to build a home. He gave up control. Gave up pride. He let his heart lead him. And because of that, a boy was saved. A mother was found. And a broken family was made whole. She paused. He was my grandfather. My friend. My greatest redemption. Eli placed a chess piece on the casket. A white king. Checkmate, he whispered. And the wind carried it away. A year passed. The city changed as it always did. But one building stayed the same. At the heart of Whitaker Global, on the top floor, a small office remained untouched. Gerald's chair. His books. His framed photo of Eli holding a stuffed bear. Jenna sometimes went there. When she missed him. When she needed to remember. And always, she left the door open. Just in case. The end.